live.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of the 2022-2023 Best Friends Forever Besties and Spiciest Salsa also. We left off our last matchup of Tears of the Kingdom and the Quarry, which, will be a hotly contested round, and I'm looking forward to talking about both. Do we want to take it away with the Quarry for I forgot your name.
Let's do some introductions. Because I think some name forgetting is well justified here. Why don't you go first, Clever Diversion, since you are the star among us, the renowned streamer.
Yes. So you all know me. I'm Clever Diversion. I do a variety of streams for RPGs and the like. This is our little shindig that we've done a few years in a row. And I'm bringing Morrowind, which is already knocked out, and and Red Dead Redemption, which is still in the running.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. I am Shaunasaur. I'm going to be streaming with Clever Diversion's voice capture here, so if you see me on Line Klein stream, that's what's going on. And I brought The Sims 4, which has been knocked out by Elden Ring, which is extremely reasonable. And I also brought Disco Elysium, which will be up against Baldur's Gate 3 coming up here. And I don't do much streaming myself, but I enjoy the streams of my friends. And I might someday soon start doing some Sims 4 streaming, so yeah.
Wonderful. Rather Sunless?
Yeah, hey. Rather Sunless. I don't really do a lot of streaming, but I do a lot of gaming, so that's why I'm here. As for the games I brought Armored Core 6, which got a deserved knockout to Red Dead Redemption 2, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which lost to The Sims 4, and I'll be salty about it forever.
It should also be mentioned that Rather Sunless is a game developer and makes video games for a living.
Also
very
true.
well versed on the topic.
So I'm right and all of you are wrong.
And the rest of us just play them like plebs.
Carbon speed dating.
Yeah, all right. I am Carbon speed dating. I mostly play story-based games, choose your own adventure kind of games. I don't play a lot of games, but I do typically try to get through the ones that I do play. And this year I brought Immortality and The Quarry, so I'll have a chance to talk about that more in a bit.
The Quarry is going to be in this upcoming round, and I'm very excited about it. It beat out my previous, one of my picks for this year, excuse me, which
no,
was...
you were right.
Yeah, no, it kind of is, which is Heroes of the Storm. I'm Line Arc Line, and I stream once every 3 years, and it's a test stream, so I don't really say anything. But I play a lot of video games, and I love them. So I brought Heroes of the Storm, which is a game I play quite often, which was rightfully so knocked out by Carbon Speed Dating's pick, The Quarry. And I also brought Elden Ring, which is a game I enjoyed very much. And we'll be talking about it in just a moment. So I think that brings us back where we left off last week.
And again, I'm forgotten.
Oh my
Bringing
God.
up the rear 2 times in a row. I'm here to talk about salsa, not video games.
It's true.
But if I'm forced to talk about video games, I'm going to talk about the 2 best video games that I played last year, which is Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3. My name, of course, is Hale Noxid. I'm the youngest brother, which is both a factual statement and a very good reference.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. I am very excited to hear about all of these games. And did I forget anyone else? Gosh, I'm just so nervous. I think we're good. So
you're nervous to have to defend Elden Ring?
Not very. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I think that brings us to where we left off the last time. We had just gone through the round of Armored Core 6 versus Red Dead Redemption 2. And Red Dead Redemption 2 took that one. And now we're moving on to the second half of this bracket. Tears of the Kingdom versus The Quarry. And I think I'd like Carbon Speed Dating to start this one off. Can you remind us what The Quarry was as a game and why you're bringing it this year?
Yeah, so The Quarry is a choose your own adventure game where essentially you are characters in a horror movie. Very classic tropes involved, but they're having fun with it. It's reactive to choices. It's a lot of fun. I think in general the entire game takes place. It took me maybe 15 hours to get through. It's not a very long game, short and sweet. And it's in my mind, it's kind of Supermassive's realization of this idea. Because a few years past, they made another game called Until Dawn, another choose your own adventure horror movie. But they made the right decision in this one, where they made the characters a lot more likable. The choices were more interesting. Just in general, I had a lot of fun with it.
Perfect. And Baldur, Hale Noxon. I would like to hear you pitch Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, it's a tough sell. But Tears of the Kingdom was a entry in the Zelda series that was a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, which is uncharacteristic for the series. Generally, they do sequential releases to their previous titles, whereas this one was a direct narrative sequel to their previous game, which allowed them to creatively in their writing do some direct allusions and references and follow-ups to some threads that they hadn't tied up in the previous games and just build on what they had before.
Perfect. Well, which one should take it? Let's go through this, and I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Because, first of all, do we have any thoughts on what we should name this round? We've got a huge open world with extremely well developed building tactics with some thematic entries and a beautiful story game mixed with good horror and quality writing.
I think it should be the triumph of the sequels.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is The Quarry a sequel?
It's not a direct sequel, it's a spiritual sequel. So the same ideas, it's a choose your own adventure horror game, but there's no crossover that I was drawn aware to, other than the fact that hilariously they use the same monster model, kind of. I thought that was very funny.
Roll it again.
It's very funny.
Feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One small feeling is good.
I don't know. I think a cute one would be Pen vs. the Sword, as one is much more of a story narrative driven.
That's good.
I like that one.
I do like that.
Zelda is notoriously, it's good story, I would say, but I think it's very light in its narrative, especially if it's put up against something like The Quarry.
Where the entire appeal in my mind is the fact that it has, like I said, I almost exclusively play story games. So I've tried getting into games with they're lighter on story, and I have a hard time connecting with them.
Yeah.
It brings forward one of the things that I'd really like to talk about this mashup. One of the biggest critiques of Breath of the Wild, the precursor to Tears of the Kingdom, was that the story was very light.
You play as Link Swordman.
It's the story of these Zelda games seems to be an excuse for presenting the wonderful world and game mechanics that you encounter in this game. Whereas in The Quarry, the story is the reason you are there. It's the focus of the experience. And it really is one of these quandaries in which is more important in video games. Because in a good video game, you both have to have a reason for being there and also the ability to have fun while you are. And I think both of these games present different viewpoints on that.
Yeah, if I could push back, I think Zelda for me has always been the synthesis of the hero's story, where the characters are the archetypes of like a hero's journey. So where they aren't very fleshed out and in depth and, you know, multi-dimensional, they are archetypical in their presentation and their stories.
Yeah. The other thing is like the story organization for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom has been, you know, finding cutscenes basically. And so it's kind of as much story as you want to get from it, which doesn't have to be a lot.
Yeah, see, I feel like in Tears of the Kingdom, as well as some other games like Fire Emblem, for example, I feel like the story is like your reward for playing the game well, because you want the story so much that it's kind of the it's the end reward for having succeeded in fighting the boss or climbing the mountain or finding the thing. You get a little piece of the story, and so people know that people want that story, and that's why it's kind of held back and held in these special ways, I feel.
Yeah. Also, like, there's more to story than like just the overall arcing narrative. Like, there's a lot of really fun characters in Tears of the Kingdom, like, you know, Sidon, or, you know, all the little people that you run into, Beetle, the weird like monster guy who eats ruples. Like, there's characters there, you know. And,
Yeah.
like, it's kind of an
There's a
organic
lot of
story.
weird characters in Zelda.
They
Like-
got weird with it in this one.
What's
I mean,
up with Tingle?
Tingle's always
Yeah.
been there.
They've
Not
always
in
been
this
weird
one,
with
though,
it.
right?
Yeah,
So far
they've
as I
always
know.
been weird with it for sure.
Yeah.
But I think they got the assignment and saw how big the world was, and I think the creative team got a little more leash given to them in character design.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
a thing that I've said about Tears of the Kingdom when it first came out is people were asking me like, oh, like, do you like it? Is it better or worse than Breath of the Wild? And my answer was always, Breath of the Wild is, I think, one of the best games that's ever been made, and Nintendo did it again.
Yeah.
Like, Breath of the Wild
Yeah.
won lots of like 10 out of 10 awards, and I feel like Tears of the Kingdom is so good that I can barely even go back to playing Breath of the Wild anymore. It seems like so much is lacking because they added so much.
I agree.
The way I look at it personally is Breath of the Wild was proof of concept. Tears of the Kingdom is mastery of the concept.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say this. There's sort of been a growing trend in gaming over the past decade or so of games that just took way too long to make for what we got out of them. Like, you can look at various titles. I won't name any names.
Redfall.
I would like you to name
I will.
some names.
Starfield.
Starfield. Basically, a whole lot of games. Basically, everything in the AAA space. honestly. Most. Where it's, you look at it and you're like, yeah, this feels like about 4 years worth of content. You find out it was 6.5 years to make, and you're like, where did that time go?
You know,
With
there
Tears
was
of the
this thing
Kingdom-
that happened, though, a couple years ago that kind of set a bunch
Yeah.
of games back.
Yeah, but that's a couple years ago. I'm
That's
talking
fair.
like over the last decade.
For those referring or watching this video in 2072, we're referring to the global
Meteor
pandemic,
impact.
and the COVID epidemic that happened.
COVID
that
crisis
was
took 2.5 years off of everybody's life.
yeah.
Yep.
But please
Um,
continue.
Yes, and added 2.5 years onto every game development cycle. which won't help any of them. But Tears of the Kingdom, when it came out, and I understood that it actually should have taken longer than they took to make this game. I don't know how they got it out so quickly. So good on them for making a game that actually feels like its development cycle.
I will.
You know?
I will still remember the video that I watched of game designers um, react to the physics engine in Tears of the Kingdom,
It's
and
nutty.
and just go, I don't know how. And then to do it on the toaster that is the Switch.
Yeah.
Like, and have it work. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are technical issues with Tears of the Kingdom. There are just hardware limitations, but what they could do in it is nutty.
Yeah, the games I make professionally are pretty small and pretty cheap in terms of performance. They're have very few 3D elements. They're lightweight. They don't have a lot of real time action, and we have to do performance passes to make things work on the Switch.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Okay.
don't know how they did it.
So
Yeah, and-
with that, I think we should call for at least a poll so that we could talk about the quarry.
Let's
if
let
we,
Carbon. Let's
Yeah,
let Carbon in
I
there.
just wanted to mention one thing with Zelda. So I think the only real problem I had with Zelda is, and I know why they did it, but I feel like they didn't really do very much to make the game feel super new in terms of locations.
Mm.
Like you have the
Mm.
underworld, but there's not a whole lot there to see really. Like I wanted it to kind of be like a whole new area. I mean, this is something we talked about even before the sequel came out about like how they were going to make the game feel like you're exploring it again.
Mhm.
And I'm not entirely sure if they were able to do that really well. I felt
I-
like, you know,
I
in
think-
terms of interacting with the game, there's a new way to interact, but there's not as much like straight up exploration as there was in the first game that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, kind of
See,
speaking to
maybe-
Shauna.
Sorry, go ahead.
Speaking to Shaunosaurus's previous statement, is it? I think it does rely very heavily on the player making those experiences interesting. Like if you're not using your, fuse powers and stuff in the underworld, the underworld's a it's drudgery
Yeah.
incarnate. It's not fun and not cool. But if you make a hawk with rockets and sail through the underworld, you're making some really cool experiences. I think the best criticism I would have to agree with is it's a very neat that they added 3, like an overworld, the midworld, and the underworld, but you have to fill it with stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm coming from this from a bit of a unique perspective, which is that most of the games that I, quote unquote, play are mostly just things that I experience through other people playing. Like I'll be sitting on the couch and other people playing the games. So, for instance, the first the first Zelda game that I had ever really seen was Breath of the Wild. It was nothing but new stuff, nothing but excitement the whole way through. It was super fascinating, almost like basically a backseat gamer for this stuff. And I didn't really get that feeling so much with the second one. It felt a little too, I guess, repetitive. Like I said, there wasn't the same kind of level of mystery involved outside of the, mystery of what's going on in the story. But there were plenty of moments that, like, I remember, especially in the first game, being able to just always wonder what's over that next hill. And you kind of know already in this. And it's not to say that the world's exactly the same, but it's similar enough that it didn't feel like you were, the first time you get to the desert, for instance, the first game is amazing. And now you just kind of know the map already because you've put 400 hours into the first game. So I don't know. Yeah.
I feel
Speaking
like
on that-
I deliberately disagree. Like I appreciate your take though. Like there are some parts that do feel kind of samey in that it's literally the same world, but I feel like they took the world and the map and changed it because there has been this kind of almost apocalyptic event of giant islands rising out of the world, and there's new caves, and not only is there like wreckage and new ruins and caves on the main map, but many of the places that you go to are having a extreme weather event. Like you go to the desert and oh yeah, half of it's in a sandstorm that you can't even see through. And you go to the Rito and it's like, oh yeah, they're under 12 feet of snow. Now you have to deal with that and figure out, puzzle your way how to get around with these new elements added into it. And then I feel like on top of that, to not only have the main map, which is praised for being so enormous, but to triple the size of that map with the Sky Islands and the Underworld. I thought that that was very, very cool. Though I agree that actually exploring the Skylands is a nightmare, as well as exploring the Underdark.
Yeah, and
they're
I
both
agree
very
with
difficult.
the Skylands in particular. I felt like added a really nice flavor, like this verticality to the world. But I mean, just in general, I didn't. I mean, am I forgetting like things that can happen in the underworld area? I don't
There's
really
the
remember there being
two.
too much. Like I remember there's the Colosseums. Is there other stuff?
There's a boss fights.
Yeah, like the Colosseum, and I like that part. But like in terms of just like being surprised and
Well done.
it felt very, and this is something that I always loved about the game in general, where when you're in the overworld area, it's really easy to on a glance tell where you are in the world. And it felt like with the Underdark area, less so. Like a lot of it's very similar, very you're in a cave, and there's some really cool ideas they did with that, where like, finding those light sources. And it's very exciting to explore the first time when you're going through it without like proper lights. But yeah, I'm just not sure if it it clearly was the result of, the amount of time they had. They were going to make like a whole new map, and I totally respect that. But they added instead, making that technical exploration with the tools. And that's cool. But just in terms of, like I said, that kind of secondary, second gamer, backseat gamer experience, I felt like there wasn't as much for me. And that's fine. I mean, obviously, I'm not the core audience for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up something in the next round if Tears of the Kingdom does make it. That kind of speaks to a little bit of that feeling of lost magic. But yeah, are we ready for a poll?
I'd like to talk about that point for a moment. So I think there's two metrics that you can judge a game that reuses a map by. And the first of which is how much of the map is actually fundamentally different. And the second of which is how they use whatever changes they make to differentiate that area from the memory of how the player knows it was before in order to tell a story. And looking at Tears of the Kingdom from those two, let's go with the second one first, the changes they make in order to tell a story. I think they do very well. For instance, there's a village that you encounter very early in both of these games that is largely the same, except for the monumentally large ruins that have crashed into it. And they use they take into account your previous experiences with this area in order to add to the current experience. You can see this in a few different games, not just Tears of the Kingdom, but Dark Souls does this. I've seen a starting area, Dark Souls, that is fundamentally different from when you see it the first time, that creates this lasting impression. Same thing in Hollow Knight, where I don't want to spoil anything, but this area that you are very used to and very familiar with suddenly changes in a way that is indicative of what's going on in the world. And it changes in a big way, and it uses that in order to influence your perception as a player. And I think Tears of the Kingdom does a good job of that. The second of these is how much it actually changes, how many new areas, how many different areas it introduces. And I think it's actually done extremely well in this regard too. And not even speaking of the upper or the Sky Islands or the Underdeep, but just the main world. I feel like I've encountered very little land that I'd seen before in the previous game or that I was familiar with. I still find myself lost in the world, and when I recognize an area, it comes as a realization, a delight, rather than I don't need to explore this place. Instead of making me feel like I've already been here, it makes me feel as if I wonder if anything has changed.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience, and maybe it's because I haven't played Breath of the Wild in several years. But when I did find, something that was familiar, it was like, oh, hey, it's that guy. Or, oh my gosh, I know those mountains. It wasn't like, oh yeah, it's the same.
I think also to carbon speed dating's point, it is a much more, in my opinion, a much more intimate personal experience. My wife watched me play a few times and had a similar experience as a backseat gaming experience. She just bounced off of it. There's not really anything for an observer to enjoy, because I think the experience is being curated by the player.
Yeah.
It's so personal in how you're going to climb that mountain or how you're going to get over to that light route. And that's a cool, interesting decision for you to make, but it's boring as hell to watch someone make it.
Yeah.
Watching someone assemble a rocket cart. I mean, like, perfect example.
Oh my God,
the first
yes.
time I played it was with everyone watching me try to come up with the dumbest way to get a cart over a rail to another Sky Island segment. And I mean, I think I did that for 20 straight minutes. And that's like, it was really funny the way I was doing it, but content wise, if I was streaming it, no one would have stayed.
Yeah.
It would have been
I don't
funny
know,
for
that sounds pretty
5
fun.
minutes.
The to carbon speed dating's point. Oh, geez. I think that a lot of these locations are kind of one-offs. Like a lot of the things that they've added to this game, in typical Zelda fashion, are added for one reason and one reason only: a single puzzle, a single experience. If there's a big maze in the sky, that is for you to do a maze and not necessarily anything for the story or for you to come back to later. It is a one trick and very simplistic view of these experiences.
Yeah, you did the thing.
You did the thing.
Now move on.
Now you move on, which I don't think is a necessarily bad thing for a game like this. But we've been talking about I've let
Zelda
Tears of the
specifically,
Kingdom just dominate the conversation. I want to hear carbon speed dating. I want an argument for why the Quarry should win this matchup, because I do think there is an argument there.
I mean, I will say that, just from that perspective of, what the purpose of a game is in terms of entertainment for the player versus other folks. I mean, at the end of the day, The Quarry is a movie. Like, I would swap off when I was playing this with the player that, with my sister when I was playing it with her, but like, it was basically just an interactive movie with really solid acting, in my opinion. I loved, they were schlocking it up, but it was super fun. I think that it's a kind of experience that can really connect with a lot of different types of folks. I mean, assuming you're into horror, obviously, but in terms of folks that aren't necessarily into gaming, that's very often the games that I end up playing, where they can be something that everyone who, especially if you're already into kind of movies, it's a good introduction into gaming, I think.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
it's a story
agree.
well told.
I mean, I think, like, to your point, like, it is the opposite of Tears of the Kingdom, in the sense that, I mean, it is a treat to watch someone play this game. It is like that. I experience this type of game through streams or YouTube clips or something. I watch people play it, and in a sense, I have played it, because what you're getting out of it is the story.
Yeah, and it's very much especially if you're already into horror, like, it's a lot of fun. Like, just, it's a much more, also, I guess, concise, I guess would be another word I would use, and not in a bad way, but like, games like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. They're like hundreds of hours of game. And that's, certainly has a good place in gaming in general. But I think that especially for people that don't necessarily want to put hundreds of hours into a game, it's really good to have options for folks that, might only have a few hours in a week to play on a game. You can get through a game like this in an evening, maybe two. I played it back when it came out for Halloween.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me as someone who's been trying to clear out their library. And I've run into consistent multiple 150 plus experiences, especially because my ADHD perfectionism makes me be extremely thorough with games. I'm trying to play Dragon's Dogma and I'm immediately oh, well, I have to 3-star upgrade every single weapon that I have, of course, right? Because that's how you play the game correctly. And I think it's really interesting that you're bringing up video games as a medium not only for the player. In the world, as streaming gets bigger and YouTube gets bigger, video games as an art form is now experiencing an audience that isn't just the player anymore. And I think it's very interesting to talk about and think about how that direction in the future might grow and evolve and expand, where games might be made not just for the player, but also for the performative aspect of it in social media or secondary media sources. And I think that's something that the Quarry is doing a great job with, and lots of other indie games are making their whole success about,
Oh yeah, we've already seen that, a ton of those, over the past few years, all of the streamer bait, rage bait games, things that are designed to be
the one where you're going up a mountain.
Yeah, well, all 17 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention...
What's the one with the tower, though, where you fall off and it's made of junk?
Only up.
Oh.
Only up.
I was going to say, too, that, it's not even just not necessarily having time to play a game, but also just, if when I play games like this, it was when I was traveling. So if it was going to be a 100-hour game, I just realistically wasn't going to be able to do it with someone I don't necessarily see for 100 hours a year.
Yeah, and it also adds a social aspect to it, because I played through Breath of the Wild with one of my best friends, or actually two of my good friends, and we were living in the dorms in college together, so we were able to sit down every other day and open up Zelda and play a couple hours of it together. But with this one, we weren't able to do that because we all live in different states, and there was no way that we could sit on the couch and play it together, so it was a more individual experience. Whereas with the Quarry, if it is a shorter game, you can sit with your friends and play that in one sitting and have that full experience without the idea that you have to meet up again and again and again when you have busy schedules.
Yeah, and the memory of it. Half the reason that I bring the things that I bring is because the game is good, yes, but it gives me a lifetime memory that's significant to me, that makes me want to make a podcast about these experiences. And I think that Quarry, hits that in a really beautiful diamond way. And it's not to say that Legend of Zelda doesn't, but, at the Besties, we bring the best of the best games. They're all good.
Also, it's very much like a bang for your buck thing. In something like Breath of the Wild, you'll play, 400 hours, and you'll have fun the full 400 hours, but you'll have peak moments of that maybe add up to maybe an hour or something, if you just chronological it. But in terms of something like the Quarry, it's very much you're going to have fun, going to be on point the entire time. And there was never a boring moment in Quarry, especially on a first playthrough where you don't know what's about to happen.
Yeah, see, that's a good metric. Laughs per minute, but for engagement for video games. It's how engaged are you per hour?
I would like to go back to the title of this round and retitle it "Choose Your Own Adventure."
Ooh, I like
because
that.
I think that is what this is. I think both games. Yeah, I think both games are. You are creating your fun in your choices and the way you do things, and I think Carbon, you bring up a really good point of. The bang for your buck. As I get older and I have less time to play games, the nostalgia of playing a game for 200 hours and stuff isn't appealing to me anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to pick up a game that's going to take 300 hours of my life away.
Well,
You don't
I
wanna
don't
play-
have that
but-
time anymore.
but
You don't want to
that's-
play. You don't want to play Starfield for 20 hours before it gets good.
Yeah,
Right.
no, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is the worsties in this year, like I'm so glad that Hale Knox had brought up that point because I think it's inspired in this particular year because we're not only looking at bang for the buck in terms of dollar, right? Fun per dollar. We're also looking at fun per hour investment relative to our other choices. And I think the Quarry has a really unique position in this field about delivering good quality value per hour that could be a weak point of some of the other stuff that we have
Yeah.
on here, right? Armored Core 6, great value per hour. You know, the even compared to Elden Ring, I would say, like, I think that that's so interesting that like as our world around us changes and becomes more technologically advanced, the pressures that we're feeling the most stress on in our lives is actually our time. And games that use our time well and give us a full, rich experience in, I would say, a tenth of the hour time.
Oh yeah.
You know, like
Like-
that's
and I'm
often
being
seen
generous,
as
like,
lesser
yeah.
as a game if it's short, but it could be we live in a world where it's starting to seem, you know, that that's going to become more valued in the future.
I
Yeah.
would actually like to also bring up, and I'll bring this up on our next round too with Disco Elysium versus Baldur's Gate 3, which is that sometimes it's not good to quantify a game based off of its length or hours played, etc., because games are art. And I feel like a short game can be just as much a full and complete and detailed and impactful piece of art as a 200-hour game.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, if you were to liken it to the film industry, there are a reason there are not 4-hour films regularly played at theaters. And, you know, there are reasons why films are cut to a certain length because you can't ask someone to stay in a public area for that long and watch something for that long. But also, like, you know, I think people have a visceral reaction when their time isn't being valued. And unless it is an obscenely good plot, I don't think you'd ever get me to watch a 5-hour movie.
Yeah. And it's, again, not to say that Tears of the Kingdom doesn't use our time healthily and well, but it's just something that Quarry does so well. You know, it's so exceptional in its format.
Yeah, I'm not saying Tears of the Kingdom is one of the aggressor, or, you know.
The worsties have some of the aggressors on their list.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
we've
yeah, I
talked
think-
about No Man. Oh, sorry.
I think we should do a vote and or a eulogy because speaking of time, we are at 37
Yeah.
minutes.
It's
Sounds
true.
good.
Yeah.
This round deserves it. I'll stick by that. Boy, that's hard.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I'm-
we should vote on it.
I do want to say, like, this is exactly the kind of stream that I want to make, is getting to these like overall structural industry level insights. So like that's exactly, you know, I'm so excited that we got to that space.
Carbon, I'll admit this. I think the Quarry is the future of the gaming genre. I honestly think that is the way the art form's going to go.
I also think that I'm just glad that Supermassive is making these kind of games because I don't.
Yeah.
I look for these kind of games, and I'm telling you, they're not really out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically Supermassive and the folks who do Life is Strange, and I mean, Dark Pictures also does Supermassive, but like, yeah, it's a pretty thin genre right now. I mean, I enjoy them, but it's not exactly being as well served as, say, you know, open world adventure game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get burnt out on open world everything. I think it's an oversaturated, not good application of the concept. In this day and age.
And we'll
But
talk
I
about
think,
that
like,
with Elden Ring and Red
I
Dead
would like
Redemption 2.
I would like Line Arc Line's take on the type of game the Quarry is. I see a strong future with VR getting better and better, where you're going to be basically living in a movie.
Sure. I mean, VR as a space has a few things that it does really well, and a few things that you need to get right in order to make a good or at all engaging experience. And I think the Quarry is really strong with that because acting and body language and curated interaction with characters is one of the strongest things that VR has to offer. When you are in front of someone or a scene, you get two things really strongly. You get scale, and you get the emotions of the other people who are in that scene with you. That's why, chatting applications are so prevalent in VR, is because it is the best online, chatting medium that you can get, because certain pieces of human communication that we would otherwise take for granted are suddenly there. You get this presence from the people that you
It's
don't
like
get
you're
otherwise.
in the video game. Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really
I'm-
makes you feel like you are
with that,
Spider-Man.
let's put a cap on it. My vote is for
Okay,
Tears of the
fair.
Kingdom. What do you think?
Everyone go before me.
Okay.
I choose Tears.
Yeah, for it was closer than I expected it would be at the start of the discussion. But I do have to go with Tears just for two things. One, how efficient their development was for getting something that good and that big out that quickly. And from what I can tell, limited crunch, which is always worth it. And two, for taking one of the most well-known storied IPs out there and just doing some bonkers stuff with it. Like, this is a Legend of Zelda game, and you can make a wheeled rocket-assisted mech with a laser on it out of glue and some cubes you found on the side of the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they added
Like,
glue. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And
my
more games
vote-
should
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
be able to just more games should be able to experiment with their own IPs like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My vote is also for Tears of the Kingdom. I think it took a perfect game and made it even more perfect.
Nice.
I vastly enjoy this game. No, I haven't finished it. Shut up.
Right.
Same.
Yeah.
But they listened to their audience. They were like, "Oh, so you like the horses? Yeah, we're gonna add more of that. We're gonna bring back all your favorite things from the last one. You want more challenges? We're gonna add those. You want more creative stuff? There it is." And all of the things about the story not being huge, I kind of disagree. I think that the story of this is possibly the best story that I've seen in a Zelda game. Maybe with close combat of Majora's Mask, perhaps, but even then, the layers that this story has are fantastic, and I will not spoil anything else, but it does things that I feel like most other Zelda games would not dare to do with its story, and I applaud it for that.
Yeah. And mine's Tears of the Kingdom because, like, I can't vote against Zelda. Like, it's unfair. This is, in many ways, the weakness that the real life besties ran into immediately is, like, this is where you bring your favorite beautiful Pokemon to the Elite Four and just smash them together until one comes out on top. And it's a bit unfair, but we do owe it to our academic integrity to give everyone a shot. But, like, it would be a dark day in hell when I vote against Tears of the Kingdom. I got a Zelda wallet. I got a Zelda bedspread. I got a
We're
Zelda.
gonna cut across a dark day in hell real quick, because you are not paying attention to the future rounds.
Oh no,
Bracket.
I am. I've been preparing for it all year. Trust me.
Oh, okay.
There's going to be
All
some
right, all
cannons. I'm going to bring out the high caliber stuff. All right.
Well, and let's just say you brought Morrowind, not Starfield.
Yeah, carbon speed dating.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely Corey. No, I mean
Yeah.
no doubt there for me. I am beyond excited for whatever they make next. I'm happy if they just keep making choose your own adventure horror games.
Oh yeah.
I think one
I'm
of the few regrets I had with Until Dawn was I watched a let's play of it rather than play it. I didn't know that it was going to be a game that I was going to love. It's the same problem I had with Oh, what's that like game where you're Firewatch? I had a similar problem with Firewatch where I didn't realize it was going to be my kind of game, and I kind of spoiled it for myself with Let's Play. But yeah, for me, it's definitely Quarry.
Perfect. And did I forget Hale Knox again?
No,
Good.
I voted.
Well, in that case, for me, I'm going to give it to the Quarry. And the reason is a critique that I have for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We often say that there are 3 types of fictional stories. And the first type is where you can see the hand of the writer while you're watching or playing or reading this piece of media. And it's not flattering. You see the straight through the piece of media, you see through the story, and you gaze at the writer the whole time that you're experiencing this. And it's not very good. Then the second type is the one where the story completely obfuscates the writer, and you get lost in the story, and it's good and it's immersive. And the third type is once again where you can see the hand of the writer, but this time it's endearing, and it adds to the story in ways because you learn why the writer wrote this, and it's a good experience. I think that Tears of the Kingdom is the first of these 3, where you can always see the hand of the writer and the hand of the designer at most points in the world. You can see why they made the choices they made. You are constantly paying attention to it, and it's not too flattering, in my opinion. The puzzles, you see the hand of the writer. The story beats, less so, but you can still see that they're trying to show you something, and you see through it. And that's why I'm giving it to the Quarry, is I think a story well told has that benefit.
Nice.
Alrighty.
Well, that makes Tears of the Kingdom the winner of this round, bringing us to the next round. Another, I can't wait to hear the name of this round, because we're either going to work very hard on it or it's going to instantly come to us, because we're pitting Disco Elysium against Baldur's Gate 3, another heavy hitter from this set. So without further ado, I'd like a game introduction, I believe from Shaunasaur, for Disco Elysium.
Yes, so Disco Elysium, we talked about it in our last episode, but it is a third-person story-driven game where you're playing a cop or detective who has lost most, if not all, of his memories. And the goal of this game is to go through working on this case with your partner, trying to solve it while also piecing together your own self, your memories, and also your psyche. It's a role-playing game where your stats are your psyche. You can level up different parts of your mind. All of the pieces of your mind are different characters that kind of live within you and can influence your plays throughout the game. And there's very different ways to play this game depending on the choices that you make and the person that you choose to be. And it also has a huge amount of I guess political discourse. It's very anti-fascist and talks about the harm that extreme capitalism can do to a society in like long-term effects, and mourns the fall of a prior communist society to this world. And yeah, it's a beautiful game. It's definitely one of those games that I would consider a work of art. And I would like to, perhaps an idea for the name for this this category, ACAB?
Yeah.
Is ACAB
Yeah.
a good one?
Putting the
For those in the
and
future,
playing
all
pain.
cops are bad is the acronym. That was the rallying
Oh.
cry for.
Oh, it's bastards.
It's Bastards.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
gonna-
bastards.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I was going to say that's very kind of you, Clever Diversion.
Yes.
Not very
I-
politically
Yeah,
kind
in
of
Disco
you.
Elysium,
have
you were
a
playing
good
a cop
taste.
who is a
Diversions.
bastard.
Oh, sus. Some would say.
Yeah.
My suggestion for it's straightforward top-down RPG.
Yeah,
Just both of them are
That's a good point.
straightforward RPGs.
that's true. They both have dice.
They both have dice.
Yeah.
They both got
I like they
attribute
both have
points.
dice.
Actually,
Yeah,
can we do-
actually
can we do
that.
one.
Actually,
Yeah,
that.
they both
They
have
both
dice.
have dice.
Yeah. I mean, Disco Elysium literally self-references role-playing games as a genre.
There's an NPC who writes role-playing games. It's adorable.
Yeah, and carves their own dice, which are very special and significant, and give you in-game bonuses.
So
So-
the entry I brought was Baldur's Gate 3. It is the third installation of the Baldur's Gate series, produced by Larian Studios. It was in open testing, beta testing for I think like 2 years. Does anyone know exactly how long? Forever. It felt like forever.
Long time.
Yeah. You
Well,
bought it
as far
more
as
than
our-
one Besties ago
Yes.
as an early access game.
Yes.
I would like to remind Clever Diversion that at that point, Clever Diversion voted against Baldur's Gate, but said that when it was a finished game, he would vote for it this round. So
But I
he is
didn't
honor
specify
bound.
which
He's
round.
honor-
I
he's
didn't say
honor
which
bound.
round I would vote for it in.
It's a good point.
Yeah, so it is a RPG that is set in the Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons world. It is Dungeons and Dragons. It's produced by Larian Studios, which did. Why am I blanking on the name?
Divinity.
Original Sin.
Divinity's
too, yeah.
original sin. Thank you. And this is very much the same engine that they built that game with. There are a lot of parallels that can be drawn from that game and that style of game that they've created in previous games to this one. In some instances, for like an exact 1-for-1. And you could tell that this is a very much like molded to fit the 5e rules and spells and mechanics. That being said, it is it's a 3-chapter or 3-act RPG story that I think averages 120 hours for most people, if not more.
120 hours is Act 1.
Yeah, for
it's,
some people,
it's massive. It's going to be like
That
300
long.
hours, like Skyrim.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
incredible. And from what I've seen, the story is incredibly well, carved out and complex. So I'm sure each one of those hours is worthwhile.
Yeah, the amount of attention that some things were given and this is truer in the earlier acts than the later acts, which I think is a criticism that can be levied against it. But the complexity and density of early act, even like subplots, is incredibly detailed, incredibly immersive. I mean, you're playing a campaign. In my experience, I was playing a video game that was a D&D campaign, and then like a professionally written one, not one
Like
of my
a-
crappy ones.
You're talking about like an in-person tabletop RPG, like with good friends D&D campaign, right?
Yeah. I finally, after it, as some people may not know, I have tabletop dice tattooed on my forearm. I love a tabletop RPG. This is the first video game I have really, truly, genuinely gotten the experience of, oh, I'm playing a solo Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which has just previously not been an option. And I think for a lot of people, I think like that inaccessibility to a group of people that you can play a campaign with, something like this is incredibly important and useful. Um, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 7 years old, and I had to hoodwink all of my friends into playing it because no 7-year-old wanted to play second edition Dungeons and Dragons.
That's how all the best groups are started. Lies.
Right. And I think of 7-year-old me. I mean, maybe not playing this one, but I mean, like having an engine like this where you can create more D&D, like the blueprint's there now. People know how to make a good D&D game now. And just like what that could have meant when I was younger and how much more nerdy I would have gotten if I had access to that. And I didn't have to wait until my friends could come over on the weekend and I could just like play a well professionally written campaign whenever I could boot up my console
Yeah.
is just really cool.
Yeah, and I think to add a piece of both praise and criticism, I think, to that, I also think that this game is best played in the solo player because it really does, like, it brings all the joys of playing D&D to a single player game. And I actually don't like the multiplayer in this game very much, if at all, just because the story is so beautiful and I want every single person to be able to interact with it to the full degree. Yet when you're playing with a group of friends, different ones of you will stumble across different parts of the story and get to interact with things before everybody else does. And it kind of ends up being like this weird stumbling race to get the story before your friends do, or it just, at least for me, it didn't really work out. I much prefer it as a single player game.
Yeah. I will not personally, I will not be talking about this game as a multiplayer game.
Yeah, and I will say that in terms of, another compliment for the game, at least for me, is it's quite literally the first game I've ever experienced where I want to like finish it, like in terms of like the length of it. Like I'm excited that I'm only 200 hours into it. I'm stoked on that. I'd be excited if I had more time to play it. And I've never felt that way about a game before. Like most games that I play and finish are because that they're less than 30 hours. And I get a good experience out of that, but like this is the first time where I felt like, oh, I kind of get it now. Like I feel that I kind of understand games better now. Respect more in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that stems from just the phenomenal writing. There's a few reasons that I recommend this game to people. Actually, I'd say two main reasons. The first of which is that it will improve your interactions with tabletop gaming content forever. If you play Baldur's Gate 3, you will be able to play D&D 5th edition with your friends in person to a better degree. You will be able to interact with that world in a more genuine way because you're aware of these little proclivities to the system or abilities that you wouldn't know you would have otherwise. You're now familiar with these because this game presents it in such a genuinely good way.
Yeah, like as
And
somebody who has DM'd Dungeons and Dragons on multiple occasions, I don't think I did a good job now that I've played this game. I missed so much. There's so much that I'm like learning that you're able to do combat and stuff wise. Given that like the things that I did were much more of like a RP heavy, but this game, like I feel like I understand the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons better than I ever have.
Exactly. The second reason is the writing. And this is something I could talk about for quite a long time, but I think the quickest way to get across how good the characters and world and writing is for this game is that there is a sizable amount of fan fiction written about the characters of this game already. Like the characters are so are so dimensional that you get hot debates of who people are, you know, romancing and who people think should do what. It is something that people genuinely care about because these characters are so well written that you feel like you get to know them.
Yeah, I was gonna shortcut to the fact that Rather Sunless customized the image in our document with a heart over one of the characters.
Yeah, we could take a look at this once my mouse starts working. There we go. We've got you know,
Like,
they over here, and
people have opinions about the cast of characters that are in this game.
it's hilarious. Like I saw this meme that was a job interview. And it's the interviewer says, one last question. Who are you romancing in Baldur's Gate 3? And the applicant is like, oh, Astarion. And the interviewer just goes like, oh. It's it says things about you, and it says things about the world, and the fact that these characters are in a drawn out, incredible story that has just as good of a world as it does the characters in it makes it potential for game of the decade. I've heard that thrown around quite a bit. It is so in tabletop RPGs, the dream is to present your players a world that has no borders, no edges. Anything can happen, and you can achieve anything that you're good enough to achieve. And video games have been trying to strive towards this for such a long time. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is one that's commonly thrown around for, you know, the depth of story. No matter where you look, you just kind of can't really see the edges, but they're there. And I think that Baldur's Gate 3 is the new gold standard as far as games where the edges to where the game ends are so far away from you that it really feels immersive.
To segue back to Disco Elysium, and I think talking about writing and what the impact of that writing in the import of that writing is, I think is a great segue back to Disco of that game. Trojan Horses, such an important analysis of our real world to gamers that I think a lot of them may still unfortunately be unaware of what they have been taught. But I mean, it is like the ultimate economic criticism, like political economic criticism, with a large lump of sugar, to make it go down easier.
Yeah.
And
I was going to build off that point a bit, which is like, I think great writing, it might be, you know, one of the most important labels for this matchup, you know, for me, is finally we're comparing apples to apples in our game of Pokemon comparison, right? Where we have two great water types for top-down RPGs. I mean, I have Ready, Loaded, and Waiting, a pretty scathing, persuasive argument for Disco Elysium over Baldur's Gate. And I know that it's, you know, the favorite in the sense that the curse of this recording is that we already know who won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Always.
yeah.
And a lot of these, you know, the great danger that I've always tried to fight in this project is making our decisions before we walk in the room, right? Because that's a big thing about what our preconceptions are or our marketing that we bring to the table, especially when the smaller games don't get played and the other ones do. You know what I mean? Like if all of us had played Disco Elysium and Baldur's Gate, I think that this conversation would be a little bit different in the sense that the things that Disco Elysium is doing, I believe, are more interesting overall than what Baldur's Gate 3 is giving to America, right? They're giving gamers... Baldur's Gate 3 is candy, right? It's hot chocolate. It's popcorn. We love it. It's exactly what we wanted, and we can't help but celebrate it. And Disco Elysium is a shot of Jack Daniels, that goes down hard, right? It's 100 proof tequila. It is something to slap you in the face and wake you up.
Yeah, if I can push back against that notion, though, Baldur's Gate 3 is candy, popcorn, hot chocolate because of Baldur's Gate 3. D&D games were not popular. This is the thing that made that popular.
True, but I mean, so, if I'm just going to go full like scrap mode here.
Yeah, do it.
Baldur's Gate 2 existed, right? When we talk about making D&D into a video game, it's something that Divinity 2 also kind of had. And, there's a lot of your last comment in the previous Besties about like it being authentic D&D mattering and having weight, I think is real and does matter to a huge amount of people, myself included, right? The new D&D movie was made, in my opinion, more meaningful by having the license, right? Mm-hmm. The things that I'll say about that, though, is like D&D tried to pull some really shady shit this year, right before the release of this, between the movie and this coming out. D&D immediately was, met with several threats from the entire community about like, we'll just switch to Pathfinder, right? Pathfinder 2 is there and it's amazing. When we get into deep conversations about RPGs, D&D quickly falls by the wayside, even though it's the popcorn. It's the most popular version. I spent a long time trying to navigate the menus in this game to conform to D&D. It took up huge swaths, hours of my stream. I'm looking at it right now as I play it, where I didn't get out of the menu system. Right?
Which game is this? Is this
for Baldur's Gate 3?
Okay, got it.
The inventory was broken for 3 months when I started playing it. I had to take a break from streaming this game, which I still have not gotten back from because of the bugs, right? When I tried to go up an elevator for the first time, it glitched my character behind 2 walls and made me kill them before I figured out that I could just fast travel back to camp. This game released in a state where if you were a halfling character, you couldn't kiss anybody. And they had to release a Short Kings update so that you could finally kiss people, right?
Yeah, like the fact that half of your playable races are small or smaller, and a large part of the appeal of this game is the dating sim aspects of it, yet they didn't playtest the characters kissing any of the halflings or dwarves. Yeah. Like surely somebody had to have tried that, right? And they had to have tested that.
None of the main characters are half-size characters, right? Like this game is celebrated for its diversity, and yet Short Kings are not represented.
No.
Right? The most put upon people of all, short gamers, myself included. Where is our representation? We can't date Lizelle. We can't even kiss her.
So, from when I brought it last year to when I bring it this year, I think the mechanics of this game are its shortcomings. I think the mechanics and the rules of trying to fit a 5e mold for this game limit this, like, they just get in the way of a very, very, very good story.
Yeah.
And
thank you for ceding that point.
Yeah, I don't think you can look at any Larian game and be like, "Yep, no bugs there. Nothing to see here."
Yeah, if I to maybe defend slightly Baldur's Gate, with the major glaring difference between the two, is just how much variety it has in it, and what each playthrough is going to be, and how long those playthroughs are. And I don't mean long as in drudgery, I just mean long as in this is a whole novel series that you're reading or a whole movie series that you're watching, right?
Yeah. I totally see the argument for size, and it is amazing and beautiful, and that's why it got a huge amount of attention.
Yeah. But I don't just mean size, right? It's size and meaningful difference between them, right?
Size with
It's
depth.
It is the counterpoint to all games should be short, or not short, but this trend towards longer, less digestible games is a problem. It's like, well, sometimes you get a Baldur's Gate 3 where it's long because it has to be to fit all of the goodness in it.
And I would like to mention that my run of Disco Elysium was over 60 hours. It is not a small game.
Yeah.
And it does depend on what class you choose and the way that you play the game. And you can play a very quick run if you go the punch cop route, where you just punch all your problems instead of trying to solve them. Or you could play the nerd cop, which is, of course, what I did, where you must know the deep lore behind every single penny that you find on the ground. So there's many ways of also playing that game, and the length is definitely shorter than Baldur's Gate. I'm 80 hours into Act 1 of Baldur's Gate, but I just wanted to mention that it is by far not a short game.
And that's why I'm couching my arguments on interest, right? And doing things in an interesting way, right? An artistic fashion. The time that you spend in Disco Elysium will challenge you in that Jack Daniels way. And there's also, like, I think Baldur's Gate 3, it's a crowd pleaser for a reason, right? Which is why I'm not surprised by its popularity. But it's also like, I could tell a lot of the story beats from the characters kind of right away. And like, I haven't finished it, of course. I haven't gotten out of Act 1. But that's also, I think, something to bring up is like...
So here's the thing. You use the term crowd pleaser, right? And I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a unique kind of crowd pleaser in that it has a very specific appeal for a dozen different people, but it's a dozen different appeals for those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a crowd pleaser because it's everyone's actually very specific favorite story.
Yeah, it is
deeply personal, but there's 30 of them.
It's not vanilla, it's Baskin Robbins.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole counter of Baskin Robbins.
Yeah. And like
and I'd like to bring up too, just so that we're not leaving it on that note, it has been bug fixed. Like, a lot of the things you're talking about have since been fixed. Like, when I was playing through Act 1, and they famously, the characters would not always jump when you jump. Like, they fixed that. And it's long since been fixed with, the animations between short characters and larger characters, a lot of quality of life improvements. I think you'll be really surprised when you open it up. There's a lot of quality of life stuff.
And like,
in a good way, they've been listening to fans for just that kind of stuff.
Like I said, I'm more than happy to acknowledge that it is good. But I'm just saying, like, my experience with it for that last year that we're talking about for the Besties was a fraught experience. And my experience with Disco Elysium was not. And of course there are different scopes. This is why the inherent crisis of comparing two art forms together will never always match up. And they both, are amazing games that deserve to be celebrated. But it's just like, when I played Baldur's Gate, it was hard to fight the inventory system. A lot of the choices that they made for the roleplay aspects of the rules didn't take all of the rules into account. They picked and chose which rules to be faithful to 5th edition in, which made a lot of balance problems for some of the spells and a lot of balance problems for crossbows versus bows. I was very disappointed in that, and to my knowledge, those things have not been rectified.
To push back on that, though, they have in multiple interviews explained why certain spells and things aren't there, and it just comes down to the fact that you can't have that spell in a game engine. It doesn't work.
Right. I mean,
there are still like technical limits. There are walls.
Yeah.
There is a box, as Will was saying, where it's like borderless. They're very good at the illusion, but they have been very open and transparent that no, it's a box. There are limits to what we can do in this, and we know you love that spell, but no, you can't do it.
Which
Can't
is
cast
the thing.
fabricate.
I just mean the
Sorry.
crossbows. They made bows worse than crossbows forever. Like that.
Sure.
Why did that happen?
If also, I would like to point out Disco Elysium released in 2019. So when we're talking about criticisms of development, they didn't have COVID to contest with.
Exactly. And also, like, I didn't play Disco Elysium upon release. I played it like 3 years later. And so I didn't know any of the bugs that it may have had upon release.
Right. Because
And
I
think
had
that, like,
I
with-
had bought
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I had bought Disco right out when it released, and I bounced off of it the same way that Clever did for Baldur's for the same reasons. I ran into technical issues, unrecoverable save files that I had to, go several saves back to continue the story. And I did the same thing. I put it down for, I think, like 4 months or something before I picked it up again.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's an unfortunate thing that,
Games,
but I think
get
I
buggy.
think the criticism is fair. Disco had much less bugs,
Yeah.
for sure.
And to bounce off what we were saying with like the differences between it and Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like this can be said of many mediums that are adaptations of their original form, which is sometimes when the adaptation is lacking, it just makes you love the original more, which I think for making new players and old players have an increased fondness for D&D in its original form, I think that's fantastic. I love that.
There's a series on YouTube. He's a D&D content creator and stuff, but he's created a mini series of the differences between 5e and Baldur's Gate, and like the things that are, worse because they're in Baldur's Gate, but the majority of his videos are like how the Ranger class is just fixed in Baldur's Gate 3. They just made it
Completely agree with
good.
that.
They just took things from the thing that people loved and listened to what people's criticisms, very valid criticisms to that that tabletop RPG were, and they just did the fix.
Yeah. I will say that my my biggest criticism as far as like the way that certain classes and stuff works in Baldur's Gate is that when I shapeshift into a cat, I can't have conversations with people. What's up with that?
Right.
But in a way, that just makes me want to go play D&D, which is the opposite of a problem.
Yeah. For me, like, I tried to do something really hard for my stream, which is do no save scumming. Like, I did honor mode before honor mode existed. And the tutorial I found to be a bit lacking in the difference between who's in combat and out of combat and what the turn order and how they handle that is, which, it might just be Larian Studios, but like there's a steep learning curve for how to even get the game to give you the menu you asked for.
I will say that, at least from my perspective, I think some of this learning curve might come from your experience with 5e. Because I played this and I actually found it very intuitive, but I think that part of that comes from I didn't have expectations for it.
Which
You
I
know,
think
my
is impressive
exposure to-
because
Yeah.
You were playing it on console, which I'll take one
Yeah.
look at those
And controller,
wheels, the
yeah.
controller.
Yeah.
And that,
It's
yeah,
it's great on controller. I can fly through all the menus on
nice.
controller.
I'm glad because it looks nightmarish to me, so I'm glad it makes sense to you.
No, it's actually very intuitive. I actually find whenever I see clips of people playing it on PC that it's overwhelming. Like I really like that when I'm playing it, I have basically just my mini map on screen, and that's kind of it. But then like I see playthroughs that where people have their PC and it's just like it fills like the entire bottom section of the screen with just like buttons after buttons after buttons.
Yeah.
So I think that at least when I play with controller, it's possible that it's just more streamlined in terms of how it's organized on controller because they are different setups.
Yeah.
Also, to get back to the druid wild shape, rules as raw, you can't talk as a wild shape.
Not unless my friend is DMing and I ask them nicely.
Right.
But
I'm
you're
just
very,
saying,
very
like,
accurate, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna save my next points for the next round.
Sure. Yeah,
one
I
of the
think
things
a
I wanted
vote
to
is
include
in-
in this one is like, there's all the RPG games have this thing where it gives you the responses in the conversation that you want, and you have to pick between three. You know, it's the Mass Effect thing of like the mean one, the nice one, and then the one that's like in the middle, right? Or the bland one.
I will say that I didn't really. I mean, with a few exceptions, I didn't feel like the game was quite Paragon Renegade conversation tracks.
That's exactly my point. Is that these games do a great job of breaking that forever for the game genre, and I'm really, really happy with it. But on the small instances where you pick an option and then what your character says after that doesn't exactly match up with what you thought it was going to do.
The classic.
Classic RPG of gaming. Disco Elysium has a built-in way that makes sense, which is that your character is deeply psychologically flawed. And in Baldur's Gate, it's like, oh, I didn't mean to like tell Shadowheart I thought she was ugly.
Yeah, I think when it's so far and few between, the instances they happen are that much more jarring.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When
it's a great effect.
Right, when most of the time it's as it's written in the option, but then once every 20 times,
and I want
your
to make
character
clear,
it lands different on the NPC than you intended, and you're like, oh.
And I want to make clear, like, both games suffer from it. I think it's just an aspect of the genre that it's going to take a miracle for that to be solved in any video game. But it just felt worse in Baldur's Gate 3 because it was so important, and I was doing a no save scum run.
Yeah,
I will say that at least because I play Baldur's Gate and Life is Strange. I feel like Baldur's Gate was a little easier, at least for me, because in Life is Strange you choose essentially kind of like a prompt, and then the character ad libs basically afterwards. So it's a lot harder to predict. I really appreciate in this where it just outright tells you what you're about to say.
Yeah,
I much prefer that version.
Yeah, and to elaborate on what Clever Diversion was bringing up with like the options in each of these games having like an A, B, C, and D. Most games like D is just like slap them. Like there's a clear worst guy answer to every single option. In Disco Elysium, it directly combats that with there's many games where like your gamer instinct is to check every box, do everything that you can do, explore every room. And Baldur's Gate 3 does this a bit also, where sometimes when you have dialogue open with another character, there will be questions that you want to ask them, and you feel like you need to ask them every question to get all of the information, to get the full story. In Disco Elysium, there are very clear things, or actually, it's not clear at all. You have to be very conscientious about what you're asking and why you're asking it, because there are things that if you choose to say that, it will harm you for the rest of the run, or it will harm you in ways that you perhaps didn't expect or should have expected. Like, you're not just clicking every option just for the fact you need to click every option. You need to actually think about why you're saying that thing and who you're saying it to and strategize around that.
I love that it adds that level of accountability to conversation.
Yes.
Because sometimes you
Baldur's Gate
shouldn't
does this
ask
also.
people certain questions.
Yeah.
there's a mechanic that I kind of shadow run in my tabletop RPGs that kind of plays along that rule of I will like arbitrarily just pick a number, and that's kind of the amount of questions that NPC is willing to tolerate, because it's annoying if someone just goes, well, what about this? But what about that? But what do you think about this? You know, and it's like, yeah, everyone has their limit where they're like, dude, get out of my shop.
I really like that.
No, and so yeah, I think we can do a vote and then talk about and eulogize the loser.
I think that's wise. Why don't you start it off, Clever Diversion?
I'm contractually obligated to vote for Baldur's Gate 3.
Can we all agree to release Clever Diversion from this?
No.
We've seen.
I hold myself to higher standards than my peers. I am contractually obligated to vote for Baldur's Gate 3, and I am voted for Baldur's Gate 3.
He cold shot it
Alright.
a year ago. He
On
never.
on record, are you doing this under duress?
On record, no.
Okay.
Okay.
Off record.
Yeah, off record, are you doing this?
No,
under-
I think Baldur's Gate 3 deserves it, but this is the genuine, like, super vulnerable crisis of this podcast for me is, like, I think all of these games, of course, deserve to be celebrated. The Besties Griffin talks openly about, like, it's ridiculous that we're choosing one to go on to the others, if only for,
Absolutely.
like, creating interesting matchups, And I think this is a super interesting matchup because, like, they're both amazing writing. And what I'll say, after the vote is, like, I think Disco Elysium's writing, if you objectively look at it, is better writing quality than Baldur's Gate 3. And I know that's a hot take, but that's what I want to talk about in the eulogy.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm voting for Baldur's Gate 3. I think it is the game of the year out of these two, but my hot take is I do not think it is the game of the year.
Ooh, some
Oh.
foreshadowing. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Carbon speed dating. What do you think?
Oh, it has to be Baldur's Gate for me. Not only am I like planning my current run, I'm planning the next two down the line. It's definitely my favorite, straight up just favorite game. So yeah,
Wow.
definitely Baldur's Gate.
It's got its hooks in you.
Oh yeah, I am very excited. Like if I wasn't so busy, I'd be playing it right now.
Shaunosaurus?
nice.
If you weren't stuck talking to us fools.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I am honestly very excited to continue talking about Baldur's Gate 3 in the next round. But since it is clearly winning, I am wanting to stick to my guns and vote for Disco Elysium. Because even though it's not, I'd say, the game of this year, it was one of the games of my year. And I desperately wish that I had found this game when it came out so that I could have delved into the fandom and seen all of the memes and the fan art as they were coming out, like I was able to for Baldur's Gate 3, because the fandom for Baldur's Gate 3 really, really made it even more fun than it already was. And the fandom for Disco Elysium is also fantastic and hilarious, and I wish that I could have been there for, like, when it was big. And I feel like that could have made it more of a game of the year for me.
Perfect. Rather sunless.
Yeah. I'm giving it to Baldur's Gate, and that's largely for it accomplishing that. It's crowd pleasing by appealing to everyone's specific interests. Task that feat, because that's really, really, really hard. And when I say like appealing to people's specific interest, I don't mean in like a shallow way, right? I have one of the people that DMs a group that I'm in has a favorite character, very, very much so, and that writing of that character touched her in a very deep way, in a way that's extremely meaningful to her, and she'll probably remember for the rest of her life. And that's true about most of the characters in this game, and that is an incredibly difficult bit of character writing, and so I have to give it the vote.
Yeah. Who am I missing? Just myself?
Mhm.
I think so. I'm going to give it to Baldur's Gate 3 because I played the introduction for both of these games. And I'm sure Disco Elysium says some very important things that would impact me quite a lot. But the intro for Disco Elysium was me waking up with a hangover, having lost a lot of my things and being an angry, upset person. And the introduction for Baldur's Gate 3 was escaping from a flying fortress using magic. And one of these drew me in more than the other, and that was Baldur's Gate 3. And
That's
that
a very fair
wins.
criticism for it.
That wins this round. Baldur's Gate 3 will go on to fight Tears of the Kingdom in this next round.
Can we do eulogy though?
I would like that. Yes.
Okay,
let's do a eulogy.
My big speech on Disco Elysium. Now that the drama is over, we can celebrate the great thing that it had to offer. You know me, you know Clever Diversion. I'm always here for the big themes, right? The big ideas, the world-changing political stuff. And my argument position is Baldur's Gate 3 is touching the heart, right? It's pathos. It's who you want to kiss in your fantasy campaign in the privacy of your own room that lets you do that. And it speaks to very important themes of trauma, which are deeply personal. And that's, important and impactful to individual people's experience of their emotions and their heart and their life, which is not to be disparaged in any way. The thing that I appreciate for Disco Elysium is that it's one of the only art form aspects of video gaming that gets you to think about the bigger outside world picture of your political identity and how you actually feel about revolution. In a world of, Black Lives Matter and, increasing economic pressure and the Me Too movement, the functions of power and how they land economically in your life and match up with your job that you're doing, I think is the key to unlocking the next stage of political awareness and consciousness for this generation and humans in general. And Disco Elysium talks about that right away in a really funny and impactful way. And I'm just someone who prefers the arts that are introducing that concept, like Pride and Prejudice is a great book, but I'll always, go more towards 1984 first, there are ways that you can elevate your perspective through art that can make you a better citizen and participant in this world in a not as personal way, which is, in my opinion, the ethos argument for ancient Greek oratory, which is like your responsibility to the rest of the world and, I guess taking accountability. As Linearch Line said, it's not pleasant at all. In many ways, it's deeply challenging to confront a lot of the themes that Disco Elysium brings up. But I think that's why they're important, which is why I kind of tongue-in-cheek gave the moniker to Baldur's Gate 3, which I don't mean to be as derisive as it sounds of people pleaser or crowd pleaser, is because, as much as we talk about the things that Baldur's Gate 3 does right, I think a lot of them can be, or at least the first hooks for a lot of people are, I want to date my cute vampire boyfriend, or I want the emo half-elf girl to have sex with me, Yeah,
it's not challenging your worldview.
Yeah, I think it's also it is, in my opinion, somewhat a fanfic simulator, at least in its opening stages, but partly that's the game was so dense and somewhat difficult for me to navigate that I never got out of the opening stages. So, I know that there's a lot of the character development that it goes into is, very rich and good for people's, experiences, and maybe I'll be eating my words when I listen to this in the future. But right now, like, Disco hit me with the themes right away, and I appreciate that. And I just find Baldur's Gate 3's themes to be no less important, but somewhat more personal.
I would like to sum up this category with all caps are bastards except for Kim Kitsuragi.
Yeah, he's our good golden boy.
Our good golden boy.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the next round. Did we have anything planned for the semifinals?
I think so.
I think after the semifinals, we have some a small section, but I think we should just bring it to the next round, which is a banger. We're looking at Elden Ring versus Red Dead Redemption 2.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. All right.
You want to
Here we
talk
go.
about big games,
We
big
are
long games.
Yeah.
we are in it now. And we are an hour and 35 minutes into this episode.
Do you guys need a break, or do you want to hit like straight through?
I want to hit straight through.
Okay.
I want to hit straight through. This
Yeah.
is a very important round to me, and I think. Well, first, Clever Diversion, can you bring Red Dead Redemption 2 for us
Okay.
and remind us about this game?
In the light of fighting Elden Ring, I think, my tact is going to be Red Dead Redemption 2 does open world better than Elden Ring.
Oh.
It is a better map. It is a map that is used more efficiently and more impactfully. Elden Ring, I think, is a game that can be harmed by its open worldness, whereas Red Dead Redemption 2 is the class, textbook example of using your open world well as a character, not just to differentiate, the story of, oh, you're here now, but feeling like the natural lessons of, I guess, Native American philosophy of what the landscape has to teach you show up in that game in a very real way, which is a magic that is very difficult to get. It shows you why the people are in the places that they are and what lessons and shaping of behavior came from those places. It also talks, again, to my eternal theme about very real world, important, big life shit about history and politics and Native Americans and America in 1899, and in ways that, Elden Ring, of course, being a fantasy genre, doesn't. But it also doesn't go into, I'm getting into the argument a bit more than the explanation.
Completely fair.
Yeah, well, we've introduced, Red Dead Redemption before, so that's kind of where it's at for me. Is like Red Dead Redemption is the best cowboy game I'm likely ever to see. I would die of happiness for Red Dead Redemption 3. Its story is the next great American novel, as I said in previous rounds, in a video game form, which is great because it's going to make all the 20-something bros actually play it and then think about what it is to have masculinity and what your relationship with taking control of your own life and standing up for your own morals, or even developing morals in the first place in relationship to your profession, looks like. It's so important. It's the most significant game. It teaches you about life. It's, the mechanics are a little difficult to get a hold of in its context, but it's only because it's trying to do so many different cool things. You develop your relationship with your horse. It's oodles and oodles of fun for 300 hours. And each one of those hours, I feel like I'm doing something novel and like actually challenging. Even when I'm hunting my 50th buck, it's in an environment that's constantly challenging me. I think the best character, you know, of course, is Arthur Morgan, but the second best character in Red Dead Redemption is the environment. It's the map. And it's about your relationship with the world around you in a very physical way. Your relationship with the map as the environment. So yeah, I'll end my waxing poetic there.
It's good. I brought Elden Ring, also, like I said in the previous round, because it is a beautifully done open world game. And I disagree to a certain extent in that well, let me put it this way. The Elden Ring map allows for exploration in a way that Dark Souls, the Dark Souls genre, can encourage uniquely. Because in Elden Ring, you are allowed and have a high probability of missing beautiful portions of this game, large portions of this game, because you did not do your due diligence to explore it. And you didn't follow that feeling that you had while you were traversing that landscape. Elden Ring has the quality of allowing you to miss things and therefore encouraging exploration in a way that I have not seen any other game do. Elden Ring is the most recent installment in From Software's Dark Souls type franchise, and was a renowned hit for its expansive map, deep gameplay, and alluring writing and lore that is never clearly stated. I think one of the things said last time was that the lore is still being talked about, and the story is continuously examined today, even a year after it came out, in meaningful ways. There's still discoveries being made. And I think that speaks to the depth of it. But I'll also skip to my argument. The reason why I think it should win this round is because the map of Elden Ring is so beautiful and so impactful that you can't help but be immersively fascinated by it.
Yeah, I'll give it. It's they're both beautiful maps.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful in different ways.
Yeah. Do you think that should be the round title, or just like Big World?
Big World.
Big Lorg World. World go big.
Let's just call this round Colorado.
Horses are as a man's best friend.
Horses.
Horse Girl Simulator 2023.
Yeah. More than one horse girl simulator. Yeah. And that's so, I'm prepared to fight pretty hard for this one. But I know that there's the age difference, right? Or Red Dead Redemption is an older game and in a sense has had its day in the sun. It's insane not to have Elden Ring win everything because it did so much in 2022, but we're combining it with our experiences of 2023. And as I'll always say when I feel behind, it's our besties, not the besties, right? So
sure.
Just keep that in mind.
One thing you have to keep in mind is we're actually not recording the besties right now. This is the spiciest salsa.
Oh, the spicy,
and
right?
Yes. So we're just we're going to talk about our salsas in just a moment.
Yeah.
We're just getting through this short.
But in the meantime,
I'm waiting. So
I think Red Dead Redemption 2 has a better story than Elden Ring. I think it has a better map. I don't think it has better gameplay, and I don't think it has better multiplayer. I'll cede always those points to Elden Ring. But I think Elden Ring's suffers in taking the Dark Souls model of storytelling and fracturing it even more and making it even easier to miss major story points. Which is, is one of the allures of Dark Souls was like, oh, you could miss stuff, it makes you pay attention. It gets people shocked out of the cookie cutter, follow the head quest marker on your compass, Skyrim and, Call of Duty spoon feeding gaming to people at that time, which was important and significant. But I think Elden Ring takes it a step too far in the sense that it's so easy to have horrible things happen to people that you care about in that game and just miss every part of major quest lines. It's not even that, in the Dark Souls or Dark Souls 3, you could, not get curious and not go through a secret door that leads you to that thing. And it's there, it's a little telegraphed, but you're also more on rails. It's a series of hallways in a sharper way than Elden Ring is. In Elden Ring, I could be searching desperately for someone for 3 hours, and they're just by a part of the lake that I didn't go to because the lake is huge, and I didn't give her enough grapes.
I was going to say 3 hours? You mean entire gameplays?
Yeah, 20 hours at least.
I want to hear
I'll
other
say-
people speak on this.
Yeah, let me speak to the story aspect of the two of them, because yes, absolutely, the story that Red Dead Redemption 2 tells you, the player, is going to be better than the one Elden Ring tells you. But the story you tell Elden Ring when you play it is going to be much more of the story experience, that
yes,
the
eloquently
plot,
put.
the arc experience that you're going to get than it is for Red Dead Redemption 2. Like you said, it's the great American novel in video game form.
Exactly.
Novels famously don't really let you interact with them all that much. Not to say it doesn't have interactions, of course. I've seen things change and I've seen players play it, but you pretty much play the one game and you're good. Elden Ring, that's a lot of different stories in there.
Yeah, and I completely agree that like the Ludo narrative is, asking me to argue against this year's Dark Souls is a very cruel thing. But yet it is the position that fate has given me, and I endeavor to do my best.
I'll throw it. What is the story?
Sure, for Red Dead Redemption 2?
No, what in Elden Ring?
Oh yeah,
what are you doing?
Whatever you want.
That's a great point.
At the end of the game, what have you done?
Wow, that's what a good way of saying how good the story is. I know, right? That's exactly. No.
Like, explain it.
I took 2 butterfly sword and I hit guy.
Right. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, gameplay incredible, but I mean, there is a certain level of, Clever said the second best character was the environment, very poetic, great. My second best character is Micah.
Oh yeah.
Fuck Micah.
Fuck Micah.
Fucking hate that guy.
And
What a
Carbon,
compelling villain, though.
And Carbon, that's why Micah is the second best.
I don't know. Dutch is getting up there. We're not done with. Me and Clever are kind of playing, or Clever's playing through it right now, and I was watching him play, and we're not done yet. But Dutch is getting up there too.
Yeah, I mean they're all so beautifully, subtly written. Like, and that's if this makes it to Baldur's Gate, I'm gonna bring that up too. It's when you talk about good writing, we have to really be critical and examine what we actually mean by good writing. I know I'm done with my Disco Elysium thing, but like Disco Elysium's interest curve on the writing, line by line, challenge by challenge, I think is at a higher mastery level.
I think that it also benefits from the fact that it's a much more you were saying earlier about like how, or Sunless was saying earlier about how, you can do all these different things in Elden Ring. And I'm like, yeah, but like there's something to be said about doing one thing really, really well, and that's what Red Dead does really well. And that's why, if you wanted to try and make that comparison with Baldur's Gate is always going to struggle because they're trying to do, a dozen individual plots and balancing it somehow for every possible way of playing. And of course, the story and overall through line is going to suffer for it. Where with Red Dead, any choice you make kind of works with the narrative, just inherent to how the story is set up. So there's just a lot more inherent built-in synergy.
In Baldur's Gate 3, you have to introduce hundreds of characters, each with 65 different branching storylines just for that act. So let me introduce another witch, another hag, another peddler, another traveler.
Yeah, and then with Red Dead, there's one story, and granted, there are changes that happen depending on how you play it, but they're mostly just changes for a handful of cutscenes, which is not to say, I'd be very curious to see what those changes are and how they affect the overall story, but it's stuff that you can kind of, from a gameplay perspective, when you were making the game, I imagine made it much clearer story to write. You're still going to hit all the same points, kind of know where the characters and what the players are going to be doing at any particular point in the game. It's probably what I imagine to be a lot easier of a game to make, just in the sense of that sense. I know that Red Dead was a bit of a nightmare to make, but just in the sense of comparing that to something like Baldur's Gate, where it's God only knows what the people playing it are going to try next.
I think excluding the story, because I do agree, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a better story. It actually tells it to you, for one thing, but also the acting is, it's acted by humans instead of, high school drama actors.
Aww.
You look at, some of the lines, they're so excited to give, I brought up so many versions
gravitas, a slow, heavy read on every line.
Every single line has to have a heavy read, like you said, and it's all cryptic. I warn against stories and writing that try to disguise themselves behind the prose and make you feel if I understood more, if I were smarter, then I would understand what was going on here. No. Good writing brings you to understanding, not makes you feel guilty for not understanding. And that is something where all Dark Souls fails, and it's something I've criticized in the past. And Dark Souls has this overarching feeling of something unknowable, something bigger than you, something that you couldn't possibly understand. But Red Dead Redemption, that gets you to understand what's going on in a genuine way, and through your understanding brings that enjoyment.
Can
I
cut in real quick?
Please.
So I 100% agree with you on that point. It's Red Dead Redemption brings you to an understanding of some of the largest and most unknowable political and historical themes that humans have available to us, especially as Americans. It is genuinely very difficult to come to full understandings of the themes for our past that are being brought up in Red Dead Redemption 2. And by bringing that clarity and that enlightenment, it is a beautiful example of the mastery of the communication potential of art.
Yeah, but it's also a slog to shoot a bear.
Well, if you use the wrong gun, I mean, it's a slog to pretend to shoot it. It's a slog to push the button that used to be to shoot a bear and shoot your horse instead in the face.
No.
And kill it. Yeah, that's where the glaring failing of Red Dead Redemption 2 lies. Is
too much.
So many times I'll be trying to do something else, like buy an apple, and I will take out my shotgun and execute everyone in the shop.
Speaking of the bear, I think it's a good analogy because fighting a bear in Red Dead Redemption 2 it's fine. Fighting a bear in Elden Ring is a story that you want to tell your friends about.
Yeah. I mean, I would counter with
the gameplay and the fighting for Elden Ring, which when it comes down to it, we're talking about video games here. The interactions that you have with this world and the excitement and the quality of those interactions are among the most important tools for a video game to have. And the Dark Souls style of combat and exploration and these forms of interaction are so fun and beg you to continue exploring and playing.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that as much from Red Dead Redemption 2. I could see the beautiful amount of detail they put into the interactions that they had, but when it came down to it, it didn't draw me in to wanting to do that interaction more, quite as much as Elden Ring did.
I'll give a point about the map thing, which is that Red Dead Redemption 2 has a third of its map locked off behind several major aspects of the main story that I have not gotten to in 250 hours. I, as a gamer, am scared and reticent to progress the story of this game in such a halting manner that took me out of the immersion and feeling of the game, because I knew that something bad was going to happen from the foretelling, the shadowing of the story itself, which speaks to the power of the story, but also the crisis of gamers, where we know we're playing a game and we want to play it the way we want to play it. You know, we want to be good gamers and get our experience that we like. And the story in many ways is about, or previous storytelling methods and methodologies and techniques have been about, you know, that sense of going over the roller coaster into the third act crisis, right? Where you can't stop Othello from doing what you know Othello's going to be doing the entire play. You know what I mean? Like, it's a thing in the Ludo narrative where the medium of gaming doesn't serve the felt experience of the game, and I have nobody to blame but myself. But I am only a human gamer. I am but a man.
I think Rather Sunless mentioned this about a year ago when we started down the Red Dead Redemption track, in that the Red Dead Redemption 2 has a large focus on immersion and making you feel like you are doing the tasks that you are doing in the game. But it's important to realize that the slowness of the tasks that occur in these video games has the danger of taking the player out of that immersion and making things feel like a slog. And I think that this is a major problem that Red Dead Redemption has, because I think if it were even more in depth, I think if it were even more immersive, they'd be able to pull that off. Yeah. And I think they're closer than any other game. However, the problem that I'm finding with Red Dead Redemption is that, like I mentioned last time, the hunting mechanic, to give an example, in the beginning, you track your prey. You wait until the opportune, chance to take your one shot to hit its lungs. But in reality, in the game, you never do that anymore. You ride your horse from horseback and shoot this squirrel 16 times.
Well, and just once with the right ammunition, but then you miss and hit its tail, and then you ruin the pelt, and now you have to do that for another 30 minutes. Like, coming from Hunter Call of the Wild, I was really excited about the hunting mechanic, but I've lost full 5-day play session hours to get a panther. And normally in a game, you'd be like, wow, what a story. You're going to remember that forever. That was so cool. But in this game, I'm like, no, it was bullshit, and I had to reload my save 35 times to even get it to spawn, and then when I finally did jump on me, I ended up shooting my horse in the face, which is not what I wanted to do from the immersion of the game. So like, that's the crisis, right? And to the point that I was making earlier, I found an even better point to praise Elden Ring with is, those gamer emotions that we have as our little gamer goblin brains, in ways that Red Dead Redemption, it kind of harms us and pulls us back and kind of wastes our time to loot every single cigar box out of a cabin. Elden Ring harvests those same energies for great profit and great ludo-narrative, where you want to go to all those distant castles. You want to find all the catacombs. You want to explore, and I think it uses being a gamer in a better, healthier way to push the game to a higher level.
Rather Sunless, do you have any comments on my my maybe inaccurate summary of
No,
what you
that
were
was
doing with that?
No, that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it exactly. The whole, like, that's the thing that made me not play Red Dead Redemption 2. Well, that was the first thing that made me not play Red Dead Redemption 2. I've seen a lot of it because, it's being played in the public space and clips and all that stuff. But it sells a fantasy, and it does it so very, very well, but it sells a fantasy that I don't have. It's that, what's the saying, right? It's you can be the biggest, juiciest peach around, but some people just don't like peaches.
Right. It's the RPG
And
sim for cowboys.
it's Sim Cowboy, and it does a phenomenal job of being Sim Cowboy. Like you said, it is the best cowboy game that has ever and possibly will ever exist. But it's Sim Cowboy, right? And the sacrifices they make for immersion are sacrifices that I'm not particularly willing to make. Does that say negative things about me as a gamer and my level of patience for bullshit? Yeah, actually it kind of does. I'm a deeply impatient person when it comes to these things. And it and Disco Elysium kind of make me wish that there were more games that told very important things that that weren't so miserable in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you
you
me,
could
I love misery.
right, but import does not imply misery, right?
True. I mean,
And more importantly, the on ramp doesn't have to be so in your face about it, right? Now, granted, we want to talk about miserable on ramps. We can also talk about Elden Ring.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the beginning of Red Dead Redemption isn't unfun, but it does have a dark overtone in the sense that you're escaping the law through a blizzard. We're watching it right now on stream, and it's some dark shit right away.
I'm still no. What I mean, the starter is miserable. I mean, are you still in the snow section?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh no, I lost my save. That means I have to go back to the snow section.
South Park made a whole joke about it, a whole episode about that specific example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the subject of like accessibility and like people being able to sort of slog through the game, I've never played very much of Dark Souls series in general, and I've played like beginning snippets of Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne and Elden Ring, but that's just it. I've only been able to play the beginning snippets because once it gets hard, and I guess I just can't get good enough to stick with the game. And probably someday I will, but as of things are now, like I did play Elden Ring for the 4.5 hours until I got tired of being eaten by rats. And I feel like there's a lot of people who with similar experiences to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
I mean, it's I think a lot on that has been brought up by several games journalists about Dark Souls, about the accessibility of an easy mode, just as like a kind thing to do for the world, and what point does artistic integrity interface with people's ability to be like, hey man, I just want the art. I don't have a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But,
well, and also the whole idea of an easy mode, to speak to this point, is it doesn't easy mode. So the artistic point of difficulty for Elden Ring is extremely important. and I don't think anyone will debate that. But difficult is personal, right? Difficulty is relevant to the person. So there needs to be some level of this is as hard as I can do. Let me play the
And
game at
everyone's
that level.
different, and
Yeah.
they need to
Yeah.
acknowledge that for like equity reasons.
Yeah, and as far as speaking of like accessing the art and these games with plot, I think that when talking about the plot of Elden Ring, like if we're saying that Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have a plot, Elden Ring very, very much does not have a plot. Like there is so much that you have to get through to pick up a tiny crumb of lore, and when you do, it's great. It's very cool. But I think that a thing that should be added to the lore of the game is the lore of the multiplayer. Like the memes, I feel like those are, if anything, lore and plot to a game that has multiplayer aspects. Like try jumping and tortoise dogs. Like that's great. I love that. Those memes added so much soul to this game for me, and I enjoyed being just like around people who enjoyed those memes.
Yep. Every animal is a dog in Elden Ring for those listening in the future.
To clarify, for people who haven't played Elden Ring, you as a player can lay down messages on the ground. You select from a group of words in a sentence structure to make your own message, and then everyone who's playing and encounters that spot in the game, a lot of them can see that message that you left, and respond positively or negatively to it, and it brings this beautiful sense of community to the experience. Well, beautifully, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too, because it becomes not just a game about fighting big monsters. It's trying to piece together how to fight big monsters from just fortune cookie snippets that some stranger left on the ground.
Yep.
Which I think is very fun.
Yeah.
I think we should bring this to a vote.
Yep.
And I would like Clever Diversion to start us off.
This one is really, really hard because even though I've had to occupy the position of advocating for Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring itself defined that year, like completely, 100%. There wasn't a single person that wasn't playing it, and it's difficult because Red Dead Redemption, I think, defined its generation as well. But I don't think I can bring myself to not vote for the history game, especially when there were parts of Elden Ring that did throw me as a Dark Souls fan that I think it misstepped on. And I don't think there's very much that Red Dead Redemption 2 genuinely misstepped on, or at least I'm more willing to forgive its missteps. So, Red Dead Redemption 2 for me.
Red Dead Redemption 2 it is. What about you, Rather Sunless?
Sure. Let's see. This has come down to, well, it doesn't come down to anything. This is an extremely difficult vote because they're both incredible, and they're both incredible at what they set out to do, right? It's Red Dead Redemption 2 set out to make the perfect cowboy game, and they basically succeeded. And Elden Ring set out to make the perfect Dark Soul, and they basically succeeded.
Open world
in a
Dark
number of
Soul.
ways. Yeah, which might be the perfect Dark Soul. Who knows? And so it comes down to personal choice. Which of these things do I like more? It's my besties, and I get to do with it what I want. But the deciding factor for me is one that's maybe a little bit more meta and comes down to my job, right? My gainful employment as a game developer myself, which is, while all games, especially large ones, are made with the expectation that some people work a little bit harder towards the end, Red Dead Redemption 2 was made with a famous defining level of overwork and stress put upon the developers that is completely and totally unnecessary, except to meet a marketing defined guideline, like release date guideline. And so, with that as the defining tipping point, I have to vote for Elden Ring.
Fair. I totally understand.
Hmm. Carbon speed dating. What is your vote?
Oh, no question, it's Red Dead. I mean, like, not only in terms of story, but I am an absolute sucker for the Western genre. I mean, it's most of the movies I watch these days, even though most of them aren't very good. But, you know, between Tombstone, 310 to Yuma, Appaloosa, like, oh, it's one of my favorite genres to begin with. Not only that, but then it's the way that they intersect with American history in the game and especially it's being one of my favorite time periods to study in general, the 1890s. In a lot of ways, it's a very much a perfect game for me.
Awesome. How about Shaunosaur?
I am also very torn here because I think I'm from an odd situation where I'm somebody who has played not really any of either of these games, but have been around people who love them very much. And like, I have very much enjoyed watching Clever Diversion play Red Dead Redemption 2, and even though I'd seen wonderful things about it, I had never really understood how in-depth this game goes. And I do think that it is like the crown jewel of beautiful Western games, of history as gaming. And then for Elden Ring, seeing it also kind of be like the best Souls-like for many people, or Souls game, depending on how you categorize it. And seeing how when this game came out, everybody forgot about all other games for several months, if not the remainder of 2022. And I feel like because before beginning this podcast, we made the joke that we would just be going for second best game of 2022, I think I might need to give it to Elden Ring because I feel like even though I didn't play it, just existing in the culture of gamers made me feel like I had. And I think that speaks volumes because it's so impactful that it just sort of seeps into the culture around it. And if we're talking about how it affects our jobs, I am an artist. I sell fan art for a living. I have made art of Elden Ring, even though I've never played it. Don't tell anyone. And I've connected with fans at conventions over loving the art of this game, even though I just like turtles wearing hats and weird little creepy guys. The art of this game is beautiful. So.
I will say Elden Ring is some of the only fan art I've bought from in the last, basically ever, like in the last 10 years. Elden Ring compels me with its characters to buy fan art as a cultural icon and put them on my motorcycle helmet.
It's very good. So yeah, I'm going to give mine to Elden Ring.
Witch Ronnie for the win.
Hail Noxid.
Ronnie for life. Give me that moon goddess.
I'm going with Red Dead.
Really?
I think
Really?
Elden. Yes, I bounced off hard on Elden Ring.
Really?
What?
I don't think I ever knew that about you.
I don't find it a longly enjoyable game, a lengthily enjoyable game. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think it's a lot of really good stuff that's got nowhere to go. It has cool things around every corner. So does Red Dead Redemption. The thing I kept finding myself coming back to was like, why am I doing this? What is the point? I had no sense of direction from being given to me from the game, other than my own curiosity, which I think is appealing early. But if the game is not giving me some sense of narrative feedback that the direction I'm going is good, I mean, I lost interest. I got to the Elden Throne, and I mean, I think I had to literally have Clever walk me through where to go next.
Yeah. I remember that. And I
because
only had to
there's
look it
no
up.
direction. And plot wise, I thought getting to the Elden Throne was the end goal of the game. And so when it continued after I sat on the throne, I got to where the throne was supposed to be and it didn't end. I was very confused, and finally when I did find what it was and I got to the next stage of the game, I don't know, I bounced off super hard. And I guess in summary, I just felt like it had a lot of stuff that wasn't going anywhere. Whereas like Red Dead Redemption it just builds and builds and builds and has such a satisfying finish. I mean, it is a full course meal of a game, in my opinion, with a, tearful dessert at the end of it.
Yeah.
It sounds like thy flame was extinguished.
Right. You lost your motivation independently to be Elden Lord.
Genuinely, me, Hale Noxid, am confused how there isn't criticism that they have now made the same game 4 times in a row.
Huh.
It's the same plot. You are a nameless undead that is going to decide the direction of the next era, whether you repeat the era or it goes off in a new direction. That's the story for all of them.
Yeah. I mean, the third one is about that. That's the point of the third one is we can't keep doing this. This is what happens when you do this too much. There's a great YouTube video called Dark Souls 3 is about ending things, which talks about that directly. It's
It
always
makes it
a
even
narrative
funnier
about
that they made up
itself.
for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, to Rather Sunless's point, I was kind of excited that maybe Elden Ring would just be totally, be new, be different. And then it's like, oh, the plot is Dark Souls 3. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great game mechanically. Love to play it. I like the magic system. I like the combat. I love the experience of playing it. But I found myself, probably like 80 hours into it, wondering why I was playing it. And that never got answered through the game. It got answered outside in the meta of, stuff. But the game never gave me that. So I didn't want to give anything back to the game.
Yeah. Depending on how the vote goes, I'll have some things to say about multiplayer in that space.
Sure. I think that it's my turn to vote, and my vote is going to go to Elden Ring because
What?
I'm serious. So, with Red Dead Redemption 2, if you find a secret, it's kind of fun. You're like, wow, the crows keep pelting the face of the statue. And you're like, wow, that's really meaningful. When you find a secret in Elden Ring, you get more game. You find an entire level full of dead merchants that upset the status quo, and you realize that if you hit the throne of this with a certain weapon, you get an experience that you are thrilled to find. The secrets in Elden Ring are more worth looking for, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
It should be noted, I bounced off every other Dark Souls. I tried to play them. I tried to play Dark Souls 1. I tried to play Dark Souls 2. I knew at that point that I wasn't going to be that interested in Dark Souls 3. Elden Ring did to Dark Souls what Zelda Breath of the Wild did to the Zelda franchise. It redefined it and allowed players to approach it in a way that I find more attractive, which is that open world, that ability to recognize when something is not for you yet. And the ability to say, well, I have to find a way to survive in this world that I can approach right now. And that brought me places in this world that I found exciting and surprising.
Yeah.
I was never quite surprised in Red Dead Redemption 2. The surprises were, that's a very beautiful, clouds at night scene. That's a very beautiful lake looked down from, a hill. That's a pretty funny thing that guy said. But it wasn't, anything too out of the ordinary. But in Elden Ring, the surprises of the places I went and the people I met were an order of magnitude more exciting to me.
Yeah, I'll say Elden Ring made you like run upstairs to tell me when you found something. Like it gave that level of excitement that like Inscription or Outer Wilds did, where that feeling of discovery was impactful and meaningful in a way that's like, I don't think people know this. And that's a great gift that games can give that, other medias might not have, because it feels like you did it. You discovered it.
Yeah. And that's what video gaming brings. I say often that video gaming has the ability to tell stories differently than any other form of media. And any art is about using your canvas, the strengths of your specific canvas, to the art's benefit, to the story you want to tell. And for video games, one of the biggest paintbrushes you have is difficulty. And the ability to put you in the shoes of a character that is having a difficult time, not just watching a character solve their difficult problem, but actually solving it yourself, is a huge boon to video games in general. And that's one thing that I think Dark Souls does better than any other, is it portrays a story using its difficulty instead of just being a difficult game with a story alongside it.
Yeah. So what's our votes at?
We are a dead tie, and that's a huge problem because we have an even number of people on this call. And I think that we should reconvene after discussing what to do about this.
Sure.
Because it is getting late.
It is getting late. I think this should be the last round. Do you want to do discussion and decision at the end, or do you want to go take a break and then come back with decisions?
I think we got to leave on the cliffhanger.
Yeah. It's our first hung jury.
It's true.
We actually we've never had this.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get
I think Linark and Clever are gonna have to play Super Smash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna have
see who wins.
I mean, it's going to be difficult because there are great points on both sides. I really appreciate your guys' work in this session for elevating the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have new views on these games that I didn't before, and it's why I like getting together with you folks so much to discuss this, because I know I can discuss video games to a degree and depth that I really don't see as often as I would like. So thanks for being such great correspondents and people with such in-depth opinions.
All right.
Yeah,
so
same.
to be clear, it's 3 on Elden Ring, 3 on Red Dead Redemption 2? Can we update the bracket?
Our bracket is updated. Neither one has won currently. But we will figure that out in the interim between episodes.
Yeah, we'll have to bribe each other throughout the interim.
We'll try to keep any useful discussion to here, because that is the heart of why we do this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we'll figure something out.
All
Thank you
right.
for listening.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for
And-
those who listened.
Yeah.
Thank you for those who participated.
You can catch
I-
you on the next one.
I expect that we'll be back in a week or two with the next episode where we will go through the remaining 2 brackets, which is Tears of the Kingdom versus Baldur's Gate 3. If that doesn't take an entire episode, I don't know what.
Yeah, I've been preparing to talk about that for
Mhm.
the entire year, so I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm
I will-
excited.
I
And
will say
then-
that I was a little worried it was going to be at the end. I'm still a little worried it's going to be Red Dead versus Baldur's Gate. Like that.
Oh,
I mean, we'll see. We'll see what people think with
Yeah.
Tears and Baldur's Gate, but
yeah.
that one I'm a little worried about.
Usually I make the joke that I engineer these all to break Line Arc Line's heart, but this time I engineered it to break Carbon Speed Dating's heart.
Yep.
It's true.
Yeah, it's just putting your 2
a couple
favorite
of years
games against
ago-
each other.
Can't do that to me.
You'll have to choose.
I what did I have? Inscription versus Death Stranding.
Outer Wilds.
Outer Wilds.
Ooh.
Oh my
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
gosh.
Outer Wilds, and you love
It
Outer Wilds
was-
so much.
I love Outer Wilds so much.
But you also love
if
Inscription so
Outer
much.
Wilds were in this bracket, I don't know what to tell you.
I will say, Line Arc Line did like cooperative multiplayer and helped out so many people get through so many bosses in Elden Ring. He was a true soldier, a true sunbro in the finest traditions of Dark Souls. Even though he didn't play the other Dark Souls, he made it more than made up for it in this Elden Ring service. So let that be recorded.
Thank you. It was one of my favorite parts. I'm sitting in front of the end of Elden Ring, afraid that I will end it and never come back to it.
It's
And
okay.
what
We'll
I
do it.
do is I just
We'll do it
go
together.
back in.
I'll get to the
Yeah.
Elden Throne. And we'll beat it together.
I love that. Let's do it. Okay, folks, that's a wrap, and we are going to call it for this episode.
Yeah, I guess
Thanks
we're
for
gonna
joining
have
in.
to put the salsa on next episode too. Then.
Oh, you're right.
Right.
We didn't
keep
get
on
to
missing the salsa.
The main. We'll get to the salsa later, and probably next time. We'll finish this short part up.
Surely next time.
Surely. Everyone, thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.
Later all.